You picked up your phone this morning before you even said a word to yourself, before you looked out the window, before you took a single breath with intention, before your mind had even fully arrived in the day. Your thumb was already moving, scrolling, tapping, consuming. And the strange part is, you probably don't even remember making that choice. That is not an accident. That is not a weakness in your character. That is not a failure of your willpower or a flaw in your discipline. That is engineering. Precise, deliberate, breathtakingly sophisticated engineering, aimed directly at the most ancient and powerful system inside your brain. And until you understand exactly what is being done to you, and why, and how, you will keep waking up every morning handing your mind over to someone else before you even realize the day has begun. Let's start with something your biology teachers probably never framed this way. Deep inside your brain lives a chemical messenger called dopamine. Most people have heard of it. Most people think it is the pleasure chemical, the thing that floods your system when something good happens, when you eat something delicious, when you fall in love, when you win something. But that is only a small part of the truth. The deeper, more dangerous truth is this: dopamine is not really the pleasure chemical. Dopamine is the anticipation chemical. It is the molecule of wanting, not of having. It spikes not when you receive a reward, but in the moment just before you might receive one. It is the neurological engine of seeking behavior. It is what makes you lean forward. It is what makes you stay. It is what makes you click one more time, scroll just a little further, wait just a little longer to see what comes next. Dopamine does not give you satisfaction. It gives you the hunger for it. And that distinction, that tiny, profound difference between wanting and having, is the crack in your psychology that an entire industry has built itself inside of. Because here is what the tech giants figured out. They did not stumble onto this by chance. They did not accidentally create platforms that happened to be addictive. They hired neuroscientists. They hired behavioral psychologists. They hired data scientists and product engineers and UX designers with one singular, focused, obsessive mission: to find out exactly how the human brain seeks reward, and then to build a digital environment perfectly calibrated to exploit that seeking mechanism without ever fully satisfying it. They studied the same research that clinical psychologists use to understand addiction. They read the same papers on variable reward schedules that B.F. Skinner originally developed by watching rats press levers in laboratories. And then they took that knowledge, that deep clinical understanding of how to keep a living creature in a perpetual state of wanting, and they scaled it to billions of people. They put it in your pocket. They made it beautiful and fast and free, and they called it a social network. This is not conspiracy thinking. This is not paranoia. This is documented, admitted, and in many cases celebrated within the industry itself. Former executives from some of the world's most powerful platforms have sat in front of cameras and congressional committees and said plainly, "We knew what we were building. We knew the psychological mechanisms we were leveraging. We understood the neurological impact. And we built it anyway because the business model demanded it. Because your attention is not the product of these platforms. Your attention is the inventory. It is the thing being packaged and sold moment by moment to advertisers who pay billions of dollars for access to your eyeballs, your emotional state, your behavioral patterns, and your time. Every second you spend on these platforms is a second of human consciousness being converted into revenue. That is the transaction you entered without signing anything. And now, understanding all of this, let something land in you for a moment. You are not weak for struggling to put your phone down. You are not undisciplined for losing an afternoon to a feed you never intended to open. You are not failing at life because your attention keeps getting pulled away from the things that matter most to you. You are a human being with a 300,000-year-old brain being targeted by technologies designed with more precision and more psychological sophistication than any tool in human history. The game was never fair. The fight was never equal. You were handed a device and told it was a tool, when in reality it was a carefully constructed environment, an entire world built to keep your dopamine system in a state of permanent, low-grade hunger. That is the world Dr. Mindful Shift wants you to see clearly, not to make you afraid of it, not to make you angry, though perhaps a little anger is warranted, but to make you conscious of it, because consciousness is the only thing that gives you any power here. You cannot fight something you cannot see. And for too long, most of us have been living inside this system without any real understanding of its architecture, its intentions, or its cost to the only resource we can never earn back: our attention, our time, and the quiet depth of our own minds. Now here is where it gets darker. Because everything you just learned, the dopamine mechanics, the behavioral engineering, the deliberate architecture of addiction, that is only the surface layer. That is the part they are almost comfortable with you knowing, because knowing it in a vague, general sense does not actually change your behavior. What changes your behavior is going deeper. What changes your behavior is understanding the specific mechanisms, the individual design decisions, each one made in a boardroom or a product meeting, each one tested on millions of users, each one optimized until it produced the maximum possible disruption to your ability to simply stop. And when you see each one clearly, when you hold them up individually in the light, something shifts inside you that cannot be undone. So let us go deeper. Let us look at exactly what is being done to you, feature by feature, decision by decision, with the full understanding that none of this happened by accident, and none of it was built with your well-being in mind. Start with infinite scroll. Before 2006, every web page had a bottom. You would reach the end of a page, and you would face a small moment of friction, a button, a click, a conscious decision to load more. That moment of friction was tiny. It lasted less than a second, but it was a moment of choice. It was a crack of daylight between stimulus and response. It was the place where your conscious mind could briefly surface and ask, "Do I actually want to keep going?" Infinite scroll eliminated that moment entirely. The man who invented it has since publicly stated that he regrets building it. He has described it as one of the most psychologically harmful design decisions in the history of technology. Because what it did was remove the natural resting point, the moment of decision, and replace it with an endless river of content that never requires you to choose to continue, only to choose to stop. And stopping, as any behavioral scientist will tell you, is the harder cognitive act. It requires more mental energy, more willpower, more executive function than simply continuing. Infinite scroll weaponized that asymmetry. It made continuing effortless and stopping an act of active resistance. And it did this to billions of people simultaneously, around the clock, every single day. Then came the notifications. Not simple, predictable notifications that arrive on a schedule and carry consistent information, but variable ones, random ones. Notifications engineered to be unpredictable in their timing, inconsistent in their content, and emotionally loaded in their framing. Someone liked your photo, someone commented on your post. Someone you haven't spoken to in years just viewed your profile. Each one lands like a small question mark, a tiny unresolved tension that pulls your attention back to the platform to resolve it. This is the variable reward schedule, the same psychological mechanism that makes slot machines the most addictive form of gambling ever invented. It is not the reward itself that creates compulsion, it is the unpredictability of it. When a reward arrives randomly and inconsistently, the brain cannot habituate to it. It cannot develop a pattern and move on. Instead, it stays alert, stays vigilant, stays perpetually half-focused on the possibility that the next check might bring something meaningful. Your notification badge is a slot machine lever, and you are pulling it dozens, sometimes hundreds of times a day. And then there is autoplay, the feature that removes the final act of conscious choice from the entire viewing experience. When a video ends, there is a natural pause, a moment of completion, a breath of psychological closure where your brain can assess and decide, do I want more? Is this how I want to spend the next 10 minutes of my life? Autoplay obliterates that pause. Before your mind can surface, before the question can fully form, the next video has already begun, and your attention has already been captured, and the decision has already been made for you by an algorithm whose only value is engagement. These are not features designed to serve you. They are features designed to extract from you, and the thing they are extracting is so precious, so irreplaceable, so fundamentally connected to who you are and what your life becomes, that the full weight of it is almost too heavy to hold in your mind all at once. Here is the suspense. Here is the part that should stop you cold. There are children growing up right now who have never known an attention economy that did not exist. There are teenagers whose dopamine systems have been trained since early childhood to expect constant stimulation, instant feedback, and variable rewards delivered through a glowing screen. There are young adults entering their most cognitively formative years, with attention spans fractured by a decade of algorithmic conditioning, struggling to read a full page of a book, struggling to sit with a single thought long enough to develop it into something meaningful, struggling to be present in a conversation without the phantom pull of a device they are not even holding. This is not dramatic. This is measurable. The data is there. The neuroscience is there. And this is the truth that Dr. Mindful Shift will not allow to remain buried under polished interfaces and 5-star app ratings. Something profound and irreversible is happening to human cognition, and the people responsible for it are not losing sleep over it. They are losing sleep over their quarterly engagement numbers. And those are not the same thing. So now you are standing at the edge of something. You have seen the machinery. You have looked behind the beautiful interface and watched the gears turning, the dopamine loops, the infinite scrolls, the variable pings, the autoplay currents all pulling you in a direction you never consciously chose. And the question that matters now is not whether this is real. You know it is real. The question is not whether it is harmful. You feel that it is harmful. The only question that remains, the one that will define everything about how you move through the rest of your life in a world that is only going to become more digitally immersive, more algorithmically sophisticated, more neurologically targeted, is this: now that you can see it, what are you going to do? Because knowledge without action is just a more informed version of helplessness, and you did not come here simply to feel informed. You came here, even if you could not articulate it yet, because something in you already sensed that you were losing something, something quiet, something essential, something that used to be yours before the noise took over, and that something is your attention. Your deep, sustained, sovereign attention, the very foundation upon which every meaningful thought, every real relationship, every act of genuine creativity and purposeful living must be built. Here is what reclaiming it actually looks like. It does not look like throwing your phone into a river. It does not look like deleting every app and moving to a cabin in the mountains, though some days that option has a certain appeal. It looks like something far more demanding and far more powerful than escape. It looks like consciousness. It looks like the daily, disciplined practice of inserting yourself back into the gap between stimulus and response. That tiny space that infinite scroll was designed to eliminate, that autoplay was built to bypass, that variable notifications were engineered to keep you from ever fully inhabiting. It looks like pausing before you pick up your phone and asking one honest question: is this a choice I am making, or is this a reflex I am following? It looks like designing your digital environment with the same intentionality that big tech designed it against you. Turning off non-essential notifications, removing apps from your home screen, setting boundaries around the first and last 30 minutes of your day, creating physical spaces in your life where your device simply does not go. These are not radical acts. They are acts of basic neurological self-defense. They are the minimum required to keep your own mind your own. But the deeper work, the work that goes beyond digital hygiene and into something genuinely transformative, is the work of rebuilding your relationship with stillness. Because here is what the attention economy fears most: not regulation, not legislation, not even public outrage. What it fears most is a human being who has learned to be comfortable in silence, a person who can sit with a single thought and follow it all the way down to its roots, a person who does not need the next notification to feel alive, does not need the next video to feel stimulated, does not need the constant hum of digital input to feel like they exist, because that person cannot be monetized, that person's attention cannot be harvested, packaged, and sold. That person has stepped outside the system, not by rejecting technology, but by refusing to be unconscious within it. And that is the transformation that Dr. Mindful Shift believes is not only possible, but necessary, not just for individual well-being, but for the future of human thought itself. Your brain is not broken. Let that settle in, because the system wants you to believe it is. It wants you to believe that your inability to focus is a personal failing, that your compulsive phone checking is a character flaw, that your fractured attention is simply who you are now and who you will always be. But neuroplasticity, the brain's extraordinary, scientifically documented capacity to rewire itself in response to new behaviors and new environments, tells a completely different story. Every time you choose to put the phone down and sit with a book, your brain changes. Every time you take a walk without earbuds and let your thoughts unspool without interruption, your brain changes. Every time you have a conversation with full presence without half your mind drifting toward a screen, your brain changes. The rewiring that the tech industry spent years doing to you can be undone, not overnight, not without effort, not without the discomfort of withdrawal from a stimulation level your brain has been trained to expect. But it can be done. You can rebuild the capacity for depth, for focus, for the kind of long, slow, nourishing thinking that has always been the source of humanity's greatest ideas and most meaningful lives. This is not the end of a video. This is the beginning of a different way of moving through the world. A way that starts with a single, quiet act of defiance every morning, the choice to arrive in your own mind before you hand it to an algorithm, the choice to be the author of your attention rather than the subject of someone else's experiment, the choice to live consciously inside a world designed to keep you unconscious. Your dopamine system was not built for this environment, but your capacity for awareness, for reflection, for choice, that was built for exactly this moment. Use it. If you are benefiting from our topics, please subscribe, like, and turn on the bell notification so you can see our new videos early.